I've made a series of videos aimed at making some Christmas decor out of coffee filters. The first one I did was how to make coffee filter poinsettia, and there's an example of a couple here. I've also done videos on how to make coffee filter Christmas roses and how to make a slightly different style of hydrangea that would fit in with a Christmas decor. This video is showing you how to make the hydrangeas, and the technique that I've done for this so that it fits more beautifully into a Christmas decor arrangement. I have posted a video already on YouTube on my channel showing you how to make these very realistic looking hydrangeas. I use a technique that's different to ones that I've seen on YouTube already to give this very natural look, including how to make these leaves look so very realistic. As much as I love these, I wanted something slightly different for my Christmas decoration, and this is what I've come up with. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It's just what I always wanted to make for a hydrangea. I've used this muted ivory colour just to make it fit with my Christmas decor, but I absolutely love it. So the principles are very much the same as the hydrangeas I've done before. There are two differences, I would say, to making this to what I've done before, so I just wanted to go through that with you. Now, first thing though, just to say that when I did the previous hydrangeas, as you can see there's lots of colour within there, so I took an originally coloured coffee filter and added colour to it once I'd cut out the shape of the hydrangea to get the colours that I wanted. With this, I haven't. I've dyed the coffee filters, and with this one I think you can see I've got a couple of batches of slightly different colour coffee filters that I've picked from to make this flower head, but I've done nothing else to it than that. So it's a lot quicker if you dye your coffee filters in batches and then select the different colours from those coloured batches to make your flower head. So that's one little tip. Just show you the other difference, or two differences between this and my other hydrangea. And it all boils down to how you cut them out. So first of all, you take your coffee filter, fold it in half, and half again, so you've got quarters, and then fold that quarter into thirds. And you're going to draw your pattern for your flower heads on your coffee filter now. And I'll just show you the difference between this Christmas one and the ones I did before. Previously, to give you an example of the pattern, I cut about a third off the bottom. I drew a pencil line down the middle and then drew a pattern, two patterns identical for the two flower heads, starting with the circles, 4 circles joined together, quite loose and light. And I then drew round those circles but produced that little pointy bit on each of those individual little petals. Then you join those two flower heads together with that little V there, and then drew another line from part way through the flower down to the side. You need probably about 1/3 of your distance for that bottom bit there, because that's going to form the basis of your flower when you stick it together. But that produces this sort of effect, as you can perhaps see here with those little pointy bits on. Still lovely. For this Christmas one though, I've folded it in exactly the same way as before, but this time I've used this to make 3 of these little flower heads. Because they're so small, I haven't done that little tip on them. I've just done simply a row across the top of 8 little circles and joined another row below of another 8 circles. And this time, as you can see, I've got one longer line there, again coming, this is probably just under halfway down, and the same there, and then 2 little V shapes there to give me 3 separate flower heads. All you need to do then is to cut that out. I wouldn't recommend doing this in pen, because on a light background you will see it. I've just done this for purposes of illustration. Just use your pencil lightly, and it doesn't need you to be artistic at all. All you're doing is little circles like that along the top, and then joining them together. Then you cut carefully around. Yes, it is more fiddly than doing those because they're so much smaller, but the effect you get is so beautiful, it is worth the while. I tend to sit in an evening when the TV's on, relaxing, just cutting these out until I've got a big pile of them already cut out. So once you have got them cut out, you'll have something that looks like this. So what we're going to do with this is open it up as we've done before, and slightly different technique to what I've done previously. I'm going to cut this in half, and we're going to use each one of these separately. And the first thing to do is to add the detail of that little tiny central point to make it look realistic. And all I've done for this is to use these Arteza pencils, fine liner pens actually, that's what they're known as. I suspect that any felt pen would do. I just happen to have these and I love them. And all we do then is to add that dot in the middle. Remember with this, you're not adding any extra colour. You've dyed your coffee filters in batches, so you've saved quite a bit of time. So it is worthwhile doing this last step and adding that central detail. And it is worthwhile getting it in the centre. It's not too onerous, it's quite satisfying, because you can really begin to see your project coming together. Previously, I'd left those two together and rolled those together to make one little flower head. For this Christmas rose, because I wanted it even more frothy, that's why I've separated the two together. So you do that with your coffee filters, and I've got about 6 here that I've already done and got ready to assemble. So once you've cut them out, you then roll them to get ready to glue them. And for this, concertina them like you would make a fan. And then when you get towards the end, collect your little stem together and now roll it as tightly as you can until you get about there. And I'm going to add a bit of hot glue on there and continue rolling. I'm rolling it really tightly, and when I've finished, I'm just going to give it a little squish together to make sure that it's fully folded. And I'm going to gently tease out the individual sections. You can see the effect that it's going to have. Imagine if you did this with different colours of your choosing. It's going to look absolutely stunning. And once you've done that, get yourself several together. You can see here that I've done a couple in a slightly different dye mixture, but you can get an idea of how they're going to look together. So all we need to do now is to assemble those into a flower. And for this you need your stem. I use canes that are used in the garden. I think they're the right shape. And I just cover them with a bit of brown stem tape. So what I'm going to do now, with my trusty glue gun to hand, is to start to assemble these little tiny flower heads and assemble them together to make my hydrangea. I'm going to see how they look when I stick them together and decide how many I need. I'm going to start with one of the darker ones in the centre, and I'm going to add it. We'll stick it to the stem. I'm going to take a light one and stick that to the other side. So I've got two sandwiched together there, and I'm going to gradually start to build those up. You can see. So you can see that's just got 4 of these little bits in, and you'll notice that when I stuck them on, I bent the stem a little bit so that I'm gradually building up the shape of the hydrangea. So there's 4 there. I'm going to start to just tease some of these down in position, because ideally you want to cover up your stem. And you will fiddle about with this afterwards. So that's just with 4, and that's beginning to shape up quite nicely now. So I'm going to add another 1, 2, 3, another 4. So I'm going to bend this one. And start to bend them over. I'll do one at the back. And start to bend them over. I think you can see how the shape is building up there. I'm pulling these little sections down and just teasing them open a little bit, getting rid of my hot glue gun trails while I'm doing it. To get to the size that I need, I'm going to do another layer. So I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I've got 1 more in reserve, plus 1 more I've yet to roll. So I'll see if I'm going to need these. For these bigger hydrangeas, I'd used 8 coffee filters, and for a couple of them I'd added 2 half ones to get that size. So this is, I made 6 coffee filters, cut them in half, and I haven't used them all just yet, so I might only need 5 coffee filters, but we'll see what it looks like. Everyone's slightly different. We'll see what it looks like when we add it on and see if we've got enough to give us the look we need. So I'm just going to prepare these, give them a little bend. I'm keeping them all fairly level, and I'm going for the gaps in between the 2. Can you see how it's building up around that central stem? Can you imagine if that was in lovely pale pinks for a wedding or a baby shower? It'd be gorgeous. So I'm going to just pull these last layer down a little bit because I'm wanting to, sorry you can't see that then. I'm pulling the last layer that I've just stuck on down. And pull some of these others down as well to cover up that stem as much as I can. You won't see it once you've got the leaves on and once it's in an ornament or a decor item, but I still want to cover it up as much as I can. And I'm going to start to open these little flowers out and just, now that is looking pretty darn lovely, don't you think? So that is with 5 coffee filters. So these other ones are using 8 coffee filters. This is with 5. And because I've cut each of those coffee filters in half, once I'd cut out the shape, it gives me a really lovely shape. Now I could stay at that, or if I wished I could add a couple more on. You can see where you might want to add a couple more just to improve the shape. I might just do that here. And if I need to, I've got one more cut out ready, but I think that's looking pretty good, so I'm going to stay at that. Now the leaves, I've got a separate video, well there's the video that I did for these other hydrangeas here. The leaves are done in exactly the same way for this Christmas hydrangea, so all I'm going to do is to copy that method onto the end of this video so you can see how I make the leaves. Just a couple things to say. I'm always looking for ways to produce something that's very realistic but also something that's going to save you time. So there's a couple things I did differently on here. The first is I did pre-dye my coffee filters in a moss green, in these Wilton colours. This is the moss green. I made them very pale. I did a tiny bit of brown, so it was a bit of a muddy green. Pre-coloured my leaves, cut them out, and then used the brown, just the brown gel, icing gel colour to finish the leaves off. In my other video, I coloured the coffee filters from scratch once I'd cut out the leaves, but it does save you time if you do a batch of coffee filters in the base colour that you need. So that's one thing I did differently. The second thing I did, in order to make the central vein of the leaf, before I used floristry wire, stub wires I think they're called, and then covered them with floristry tape. For these I used these stub wires, I don't know if you can see them there, that are already coloured green. So you can bend them just the same, but they've got a sort of plastic coating on, but they're exactly the right size that I needed to produce these leaves. You can get other ones as well. Let me show you. You can get wires that are covered in floristry tape. You can see those there. So if you want to save yourself some time, rather than sitting and wrapping wire with floristry tape, you will have to pay for them, I guess, but you can get these pre-made. Otherwise, I've done the leaves for this exactly the same as the leaves on my previous video. So I think they're looking fantastic. I'm going to do a few more, then incorporate them in my Christmas decor, and think about using this particular technique with the smaller flower heads and half a coffee filter to make each of the little individual flower heads for different decor throughout the season. So good luck, I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, we're ready to make the leaves now to finish off these hydrangeas. The first thing to do is to dye your coffee filters green. I'm using 2 greens, the Wilton icing gel moss green and Kelly green, and I tend to do mine in batches. So I've got a batch of coffee filters here I've pre-dyed. These are the moss green, and the difference in the colour is dependent on how much water you add. This is moss green, and because I wanted to seal in the colour and make it a richer colour, I've added a bit of PVA glue to the water and the icing gel mix. That sets the colour in beautifully. And these at the bottom are the same techniques but with Kelly green. So some are just diluted with water, some have got PVA glue added in. But I find it easier to spend half an hour and do several batches, so I've got various colours to choose from. Now, as I'm filming this, it is the beginning of November in England, and autumn has definitely arrived. And when I look at the hydrangea leaf in my garden, the tree that I've got in the garden, is it a tree, a shrub, a bush in my garden? There are 3 different leaves on display. There's the green leaf that has been there throughout the summer. There's one that is definitely an autumn colour with a brown, dark brown edge to it. And because nature is so wonderful, on the same bush is one that's got this deep pink. There were some earlier this month that were pink down to about here, but gorgeous colours of autumn. So in addition to the green, I've got some pink and I've got some brown, and I'm going to use a combination of those colours, the green, the pink and the brown, to dye these coffee filters to make them look more realistic. So we're starting off with a basic coffee filter that's already been dyed, and you cut them to shape. You need 2 shapes for each leaf, and as a rule of thumb I would say you're looking at having 2 per plant that's about the size of your forefinger, and 2 that are about the size of your middle finger, just to give you a rough idea of the size. The shape, get yourself a hydrangea leaf and cut around it, otherwise look at that, it's pretty much a standard leaf shape. So here I've already dyed some of these leaves, but I'm just going to show you how I do that for each of these colourways. So the first one is this gorgeous rusticy pink, and I'm using the pink gel with a little bit of water, brown gel with a little bit of water, and then I'm mixing the 2 together to produce this sort of darker pinky colour. And I'm just going to do the tips down to about midway. You can see it doesn't look terribly inspiring just at the moment. I'm going to add a little bit more pink to it. I'm going to do the same to these smaller leaves. I'll just show you, that's the colour pink just on its own. I'm going to do a couple with just the pink. As you can see, I'm not terribly artistic. I'm just doing what I think looks cute and good. So I'm just going to leave that for a second while we go to the next leaf. And these are ones that are pretty much the same as the green leaf that's there all throughout the spring. And these, I'm just going to use this Kelly green, and I'm just adding a bit of shading. I tend to make this up as I go along. So when I look at that now, I'm thinking, do I like it? Not so bad. I don't want to add any brown particularly at this stage because this is the colour of the leaf that appears in the spring and the summer. So I don't want to add that brown. So I'm just going to add that shading around the edge. These have been pre-dyed in the Kelly green, but not with PVA glue. So I'm just going to add that there. And then the final ones, the final leaves, I've already done just by taking the very pale moss green pre-dyed, and I've added a bit of brown to the outside. As you can see, they are really quite subtle, and as much as I love subtle, I could leave it like that, but I want to add a little bit more depth, so I'm going to add a little bit more brown to get them to look like these leaves that I've done before. So we've got moss green dyed coffee filters cut to shape. I've put a wash basically of brown around the edges, and now I'm just going to add a deeper layer of brown. One more tip I almost forgot to mention. What I tend to do with my leaves, once they've been dyed, is screw them up. This will then produce an uneven sort of surface, so that helps to give you quite a realistic leaf look and feel. Goes a bit against the grain. I want to iron these now, if I'm honest, but they will look better, honestly, if you leave them crinkled. So I'm going to add a bit more round to the edges of those leaves. What I'm trying to emulate is that where, you know, in autumn where things strange start happening to your leaves and they go an odd colour. And you can see how the coffee filters absorb the dye. So although I've only put a little bit around the edge, they get absorbed into the coffee filters. So what I'm going to do now is just go back with some plain water. I'm just going to go along the edge of that where the dye meets the original dye of the coffee filter and just blend it in a bit so you haven't got that severe line. And I'm going to do that for each of the colours. So moving along, I'm going to do that with these green. And I'm doing the same, and I'm doing the same with the red, just blending the edges with plain water. There you have 3 different looks using the same technique but just different colours. In fact, when I look at these now, I'm going to blend that end bit. That looks a bit odd to me. And that's all you need to do with a bit of water on your brush. That's going to look better. Okay. When those are dry, what you need to do then once dry, you stick the two together, stick 2 pieces of coffee filter together, sandwiched with a piece of wire. Now I know these leaves haven't been embellished, I'm just using these for an example. This wire, I've got its, as you can see, it's sort of thinner one end, thicker the other. Because I'm making hydrangeas, I want the stems to be brown, so I'm just very quickly going to cover the bottom half of that with some brown stem tape. So this is the stem tape that flower arrangers and florists use. There's the bottom half, and all I'm going to do then is to stick these 2 together. I'm using Mod Podge at the moment because I've got a big pot of it open, but I have done this perfectly well with the cheapest PVA glue there ever is that I got from a discount craft store, so that works just as well. I'm placing that on, the other one over the top. And I want that stem to be in the middle because that's going to form the central vein of the leaf. So I'm going to hold that in position. See, it's got a bit of a crease there. I don't know whether you can see that. I've made a crease. Once they're dry, you can peel them off your parchment, and here's one of the pink and green ones that I've done already. And you'll notice from this side here, they're far from perfect. But don't worry about that, because what we're going to do next is to shape that leaf. So, starting at the bottom and working up, I'm just going to trim off that edge that isn't perfectly together. I'm going to just shape the top a little bit, and then I'm going to add a serrated edge, which is what hydrangeas have. They're not deep serrations, but I've got a little bit, so I'm going to start towards the top, and I'm cutting in a perpendicular fashion down this leaf, and I'm just going to go halfway. It'll save you time and it still gives you the effect that you need. And just so I can see what I'm doing, I'm just going to separate these little serrated bits, because what I'm going to do next is to just come in a bit closer so you can see, starting at the top there with that first one, is to cut from the top of the leaf down to the bottom of that cut that I've just made. You will do this better than me. I'm trying to do this through the lens of my camera. I think you get the picture there, so that you've got a serrated edge to your leaf. And there's one final embellishment that we're going to do, and that is to replicate the veins of the hydrangea. You can perhaps see there's one final step we're going to do. So there we've got the serrated edge. There's one final step we're going to do, and that's to add the vein detail of the hydrangea. For that, I'm going to use a sharp pencil, and I'm going to try and emulate the shape of that veining. I'll just show you first an example. I can get that there so you can see it. Got a wiggle that goes to the top, one starting halfway down or from the bottom, and then that joins a branch from the other vein. I'm going to do that very quickly, really, without thinking, without worrying too much about the pattern that I'm doing. I find that's better because I don't do random very well. So I'm doing that all the way up to the top, wiggly veins, joined, some of them at the top, and I follow that patterning all the way down either side. And of course, because you've got the vein in the middle, that's wire, you can bend that any way you want. So there we have your finished hydrangea leaf. So I've done quite a few of these pinky ones because I think they look lovely. So I've done quite a few of these pinky ones. I think they look gorgeous. They are the plain green, still looking very effective. And I've just done a few of these, but I shall do more of the ones that look more autumny colours. But how gorgeous are they? So all we need to do now is to add those to the hydrangea. So now I'm going to apply the leaves, and the first two, the smaller two, go towards the top and at 90-degree angle to each other. So I'm just going to get some stem tape, sticky side down, hold them in place at the top, this isn't how you would normally use stem tape, but they're proving a little bit troublesome for me this morning, so I want to get that top sealed off nice and neatly and firmly. So I'm wrapping that round really firmly and then twist and pull to get those leaves in place. I'm going to stop part way down because I'm now going to apply the second leaves. These are two larger ones. Again, they go opposite each other, and this time they're going in the opposite direction to the first two. You can see that there. So you've got two north and south, and the others west and east. And again, I'm going to apply these nice and tight at the top. And then bring my stem tape, twist and pull, bringing that stem tape right down. Just make some final adjustments. This is the beauty of having a bendy wire in your leaf. You can change the shape of them. I love this pink colour. I think that's gorgeous. So there you have the finished hydrangea. One I made earlier with the slightly darker coppery coloured leaves.